Hi, this is Azim Sahir, a human capital specialist. I wanted to personally welcome you and thank you for joining us today. We are really glad you are here because this podcast designed to inspire people to live a meaningful life and pursue their passion. Welcome to EI Cafe with Azim Season 3. I give late look back at the lives and business of today's most important element with emotional intelligence. You will learn how emotional intelligence can be a key factor for your success in both personal and professional life. You will hear key life lessons and tips from most prominent personalities, business leaders, entrepreneurs, EI practitioners, and executive coaches from all over the world. Just to let you know, you can watch the video version of this podcast on my YouTube channel. So sit back, relax with a cup of coffee, and let's get into the show. This is EI Cafe with Azim. 30 minutes of valuable learning. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep improving. If you are interested in learning more about the psychology, behavioral science, and neuroscience behind employee experience, remote experience, and customer experience, and if you are looking to explore how we can bring more empathy and emotional intelligence into these fields, then this event is for you. The EI Evolution Summit is one of a kind 5-month-long online event. Our summit days in October include speakers like Dr. Daniel Gorman and Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett. Yes, the global icon for emotional intelligence and emotion are part of this EI Evolution Summit. You don't have to wait until October to learn more, because we have organized a 5-month warm-up we are calling the EI Learning Launch. That's 5 months of workshops, talks, fireside chats, and panel interviews. On top of all these, the content from the 5-month program is on demand, so you can choose to watch it live and participate, or you can watch the recording at a time of your convenience through their online platform. So here is a special offer for all the listeners of EI Cafe with Azim podcast. You will get a 25% off when you use the code 25OFFSRI when you are registering for the summit. So log on to www.register.eievolutionsummit.com and enter that code. I have added these details in the podcast show notes too. This offer is available until end of June. Don't miss out this great opportunity to hear from the experts. So hurry, book your tickets now. Empathy, defined by the entrepreneur Joey Pomerenke as the feeling that you understand and share another person's experience and emotions, and the ability to share someone else's feelings, isn't always the first thing people think about when they consider business skills, right? Again, empathy should be embedded into the entire organization, writes Belinda Parmar in the Harvard Business Review. A very warm welcome to the Season 3 of EI Cafe with Azim. Your host, Azim Sahir, a human capital specialist, a Lego Series Play facilitator, ICF certified coach, and an emotional intelligence practitioner. Here we are again for another exciting episode, a 30 minutes of valuable learning. In today's episode, we are going to talk about empathy. And what is the connection between empathy and the business growth? The topic is empathy the answer for business growth? To discuss this, I have a friend and a colleague, a connection all the way from UK. Let me introduce her. She's a lecturer, author, coach, and a consultant in customer and employee experience. She has given TEDx in 2019 about emotional intelligence and customer experience. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Sandra Thompson, founder of EI Evolution. Sandra, welcome to the cafe.
Thank you so much for having me. Crikey, it's such a long explanation as to what I do and the enormity of it. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. So on behalf of the cafe, I would like to my humble gratitude for you to having spending your valuable Saturday morning with me in the cafe. So thank you very much for that, Sandra.
I can talk about this topic any time of the week. I just hope that we manage to squeeze enough into half an hour for your listeners. There's so much to cover.
Absolutely, yes. So, as you know, empathy is the word everybody's talking about these days, especially after the coming up of the with the pandemic, right? And businesses have started about talking about empathy. Those days, only individual perspective empathy is there, but now we are talking about in terms of business, right? Now, before going there, let me put this question to you. What's the difference between empathy and the emotional intelligence? Because this is one of the major questions and concerns raised by many people. So, what's the difference, Sandra?
Well, I think a lot of people use those terms interchangeably. I think they think it's the same thing, and actually, it's quite different. When we look at the skill of emotional intelligence, empathy is one of 12 of the competencies within emotional intelligence. And so, what we have is the ability to understand yourself. And when you have that self awareness, you then have the ability to decide how you're going to show up. And then, when you've mastered that particular competency, you are more likely to be able to empathize effectively. And I think that's the difference. I think that people believe that empathy can just happen, that you can just be empathetic. And in actual fact, my challenge to people's thinking is that if they think about empathy within
Mm,
emotional intelligence, we
mm.
might get closer to what real empathy is. So there's quite a contrast there, I think.
Wow. So, what you mean to say is, correct me if I'm wrong, having empathy is part of emotional intelligence.
That's absolutely correct. And in fact, empathy works at three different levels. I can see you nodding furiously. So, empathy can happen on three levels. You can think that you understand how the other person is feeling.
Mm,
You can feel something you believe is similar to what the other person is feeling.
mm,
But the third level, the deepest level, is compassionate empathy. And that's where you feel something so incredibly strongly that you're moved to act. And that's
mm,
the really interesting thing about customer experience, because if we are moved to act, then we will do more in
mm,
service of the customer.
mm,
But then the question here is, does the organization enable you to act on the empathy that you feel? So, all
mm.
exciting stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So I really like the point you picked it up. Compassion also part of it. So I have a question like down the line. I'll ask you that. Before that, so emotional intelligence is about all about soft skill though, right? And there are no hard results from it. Are there? What's your thought?
Do you know, I am very fortunate to have a number of statistics, as it were, in my back pocket that I can talk to people about, because very often businesses believe that they need to go like they're really extra mile, and
Mm,
why should they invest in something that doesn't give them immediate results? But here's the thing. So studies that were done, not too long ago, have proven that salespeople, and this is a household name, this is a global makeup brand.
mm,
Salespeople with the skill of emotional intelligence can make $100,000 more when they have the skill of emotional intelligence. And here's another thing: people who work in the legal sector, so in professional services, they can charge between 8 and 10% more per hour, per partner, per client. I mean, that amounts to a lot of money. And it's not just about the cash. What we know is that people who practice this skill also have the ability to have better relationships. They feel much more healthy. They have a better kind of balance in their emotions, which of course means they generally lead happier and healthier lives, which has got to be, a massive plus for businesses too.
So what you just said is the ROI of having an emotional intelligence program in the workplace, isn't it?
That is exactly right. There are increasing numbers of statistics that are proving. So when you have, and this is an important point, when you have what we would call a control group, so those people who have not been taught the skill, so they are like the control group who haven't had that intervention. And then you have a group sitting alongside that group who have had the skill, you can see these marked differences. So it is great for business. And that's why it's fascinating that some people still believe that there are no place for emotion in business. And, inverted commas, we don't do emotion here. Well, that's not actually true. What I think people sometimes get confused about is that their interpretation of emotion, they perceive that it's people running around shouting, screaming, crying, slamming doors, and it's not about that at all. It's around, we are chemistry labs. That's what I'd like to explain. We're filled with chemicals that influence how we feel, and that's why these hard results come, because you're better able to manage those chemicals in your body.
All right. So we did now talk about a little bit of emotional intelligence. Now I'm going to direct into in terms of business aspect. When you talk about business, there's no business without customers. Absolutely, right? No
Yeah,
business without
absolutely.
customers. So now, outside the company, developing empathy can help you develop and market products and services for your customers, right? In this
Yeah.
line, Sandra, why does customer experience need emotional intelligence? What would be the impact on this particular components? And you can share some experience. I know you have been running fantastic workshops on customer experience and AI. You can share some experience with your clients what you had in this particular context, so it will be beneficial for us listeners also.
Thank you, and it's a great question. So I think all of us know that we remember good and bad experiences. The things that happen in the middle kind of evaporate. We don't remember them because there's no emotion attached to them. And so if we think about businesses are basically collectives of people who interact with other people. So when we're able to listen very carefully, when we're able to respond appropriately, then the customer feels heard, and then you're more likely to give the customer what they want. And here's an example. I did some work for an infrastructure company in the UK. So these are engineers. These are very, very high IQ engineers. And when we talked to them about what they did, they explained lots of very, very technical information. And when I then started to introduce stories about individuals, and we started talking about saving lives and making the difference to this person and that person, and we showed films of people expressing their gratitude and emotion for the work that these engineers had done, it changed the conversation. And what it did is it gave those engineers more purpose, more meaning, and it meant that they understood the reason why they were doing that work. And then what we did is we worked on the emotional intelligence of those engineers. And here's what happened. Firstly, they started to innovate better, which means that they were looking for very different signals. They were looking for non-verbal cues, so nodding and body language. They were looking out for the words that other engineers weren't saying because they sensed that things weren't being said. So as a community of workers, they produced better results. That's one thing. And the second thing is, from the customer perspective, they were doing things and explaining things so much better, which means that those customers became emotionally connected to that organization. This isn't about satisfaction. This is about emotional connection. And the reason why that's important is, I'm getting there, just bear with me for a minute. The reason why that's important is because memorable customer experiences should be positive. We know that. We don't want negative customer memories, but you are more likely to get a positive customer memory if you use emotional intelligence.
Fantastic. I really like the fact you brought in about engineers. If I must, I may ask another profession. I'm not quite sure how in UK you experience this, but in Sri Lanka, in terms of doctors, right? I believe you will have some appointment system. We do also have, but still we have certain bad experience with the doctors, right? One thing,
Yeah.
they don't come on time because we have to take the token number and stay on queue, and they don't come on time. And even though they come, it takes a lot of time for us to stay. That means we are on time, but unfortunately, we get delayed for 2 hours to see the doctor. So when we ask, they say, I'm just coming out of surgery. So we can't say anything, right? So in that context, how can you, it's not a memorable experience for me. It's a very bad experience because we also plan certain things. How do you define in this sector customer experience? Because health sector is really important in a country.
And you know, that's a really great question, because in fact, my customer experience journey started working for a medical company that was trying to do better with its patient experience. So that's the first thing. And actually, I was moved to want to achieve better because I knew statistics tell us from America that actually, if you create an emotional connection between medical staff and patients, you get better patient outcomes. So what this means is there's a little bit of psychological safety in here. And this is the psychological safety is about being able to say what you think, be in the workplace, being able to challenge and to be yourself. And this is the work of Amy Edmondson. I can include a link in your notes. But in the medical profession, there's something very interesting that goes on, where the status of people like doctors and consultants, very often they perceive that they are more important than the patient. And when you work with them, and I've seen this happen, when you work with them and you help them to build their self-awareness, and when they understand the impact that they are having by their behavior, and when you enable them to think, would you want your children, your aunties, your brothers, your sisters to be treated in this way, then they start to build self-reflection, and then they start to behave differently. And I'm going to give you a personal story here. I've dealt with doctors in the past who have been very offhand, very what's the word? Very flippant, very
I can realize the experience now from your facial expressions.
Oh yes, but only recently I dealt with a doctor who was empathetic, who was considerate, who was understanding, and he listened. It was incredible, and I ended up thanking him for his attention, and I decided I would take the course of action that he gave me. And I've recommended him to so many people as a consequence of him treating me as a human being, not as the number. Now, there's additional complications, aren't there, in the medical profession, which is these individuals are very often pressured for time. And that's the reason why I bring in this point, that you can have an individual who is empathetic, but if the organization does not allow them to demonstrate those particular skills, then they just don't have the opportunity to show them. So in summation, when you have an individual who has the space, who feels safe to be able to speak out, to give lots of comments, to help the customer as much as they can, the patient is more likely to do what the doctor says. In this country, did you know this? In this country, I heard the other day, 50% of people who get their medication do not take it.
Wow, it's interesting.
And I wonder whether, and I never knew that, and I do wonder if staff were more empathetic, would they get better results? And in America, they're proving that they can. There are hospitals, entire communities of medical staff who are doing a much, much better job. Long answer, sorry, but I feel very passionate about it.
Fantastic. No, I really like the way you put forward, and I just want to tell the listeners, it's not only on the medical aspect, even though experience is shared on medical, because I raised it as a doctor, because that's the experience everybody goes through, but it really involves in other organizations, other sectors as well. As you rightly connected to the area of organizational context, because even the staff is so empathetic, but if you don't have the opportunity to do that, then there's a question mark. In that line, Sandra, my next question is, how do empathic leaders come into play or help to grow empathy across business? Because leaders should show a lot of compassion, to the staff. Then staff will treat that customers in such a way, right? What is your take on this?
It's role modeling. That's the key thing here. If you have an empathetic leader, you are more likely to know that it's acceptable to be empathetic, and you will learn how to do it. That's what we do. We copy one another's behaviors, don't we? We look out for the people with the power. There's a lot of science out there about how powerful people influence how we show up. And when leaders are in those positions of power, number one, they show exactly how you should behave. And also, they should draw attention to people in their staff when they are not showing empathy. So there's a little bit of demonstrating best practice, and there's also coaching and guiding those who don't naturally find empathy skills within themselves. When you look at empathetic leaders, they will be more and more in demand as people start to return to work, or whatever happens in the next 18 months. There's going to have to be some compassion and empathy because people are going to expect it, both customers and employees.
So what you're trying to say is, if the leaders play their own role properly with pure emotionally intelligent leaders, it is going to affect or impact the bottom line of the organization. That means the growth, right?
Absolutely. And here's the thing. What we have seen in the UK, we've seen it in New Zealand, we've seen it in parts of the UK, parts of the Middle East, where leaders have been empathetic. It has meant that customers have decided to stay with that business because they stand out from the competition, because those companies that are not empathetic, who say, no, we can't do that, and no, that's not possible, and they don't even apologize, we are not tolerating it anymore. As a group of consumers, we are not tolerating it. We've had it, all of us as the world have had the most unusual year, and we just will not tolerate organizations that are not compassionate and empathetic. They will, I think those that demonstrate it will thrive. They're already showing that. And those that don't will slowly wither. They will.
So I'm going to put in you a little bit on the spot, Sandra, on this point, right? Let's say leader is emotionally intelligence, is practicing empathy, compassionate person. We see a group of people is really acting on what's his behavior, but there are little, every organization have such a personalities who resist to change, right? That comes with the emotions. How does that impact the business?
It's a really great question. And there's some really great research which talks about groups of people, so the people within an organization going on this journey when they go through change. And what happens there is, here's the announcement of what the change is, and then you get people dipping in performance because they're upset, they are angry, they are worried, they are fearful of what the change means. And what that means for organizations is that when change is announced, and then when change is happening, it causes chaos because people don't know in their minds, they're full of fear because they don't know whether they're going to have a job. They don't know whether they're going to be working with the people that they're going to be working with, whether they're going to do the projects they love. When people use emotional intelligence to communicate change, they are much better able to understand the emotions that people might feel when the change is announced, which means that they are able to relate. They are able to say to communities of people, we know that you might feel this. We are doing these things to help you feel reassured, to feel comfortable. And they're honest and they're transparent. And what happens with that is that those people continue to work more productively because they trust. Now, we're like 20 minutes into this conversation and this word has come up for the first time, but it's big because it means that when organizations use EI, then when people are faced with a change, they feel that they are at least part of the change. The change isn't being done to them. And so that productivity level isn't dramatically changed and people stay loyal because they trust.
Fantastic answer. I think I really love the way you put forward the trust, right? Authenticity is one of the key element. I think any organizational leader should look into it, right? Be authentic, be trust, build that trustworthiness, right? Very good the way change I like, because yesterday I did a workshop with Lego Serious Play about mindset, engaging, and because the problem what they have is they have a very high attrition, because it's so much pressure, because they're going through a change because of COVID, right? So they have left sent out a couple of people, but then again the problem, but they came and said, we have an issue like this, can you do something? I said, I can't do a major change in one day, it's a long process, but I just asked one question: have you ever properly communicated the changes you're going to do? That's the answer I got it. So as you correctly said, if a leader comes up and properly communicate with an EI aspect in the back of the mind, that means the change would be very easy, because insecure feeling will not be there on the employees. So that will automatically transform into customer experience, isn't it, Sandra?
That's exactly right. Because if you think about it, if we are, so take you and I for just a second, we're both dealing with customers every day. If at the back of our mind, we are feeling threatened or we're feeling fear, it shows up. It means that we're not fully focusing on the customer. It means that we will change our attitude and our behavior. The tone of our voice even might be completely different. And there's just no need for it. Organizations can avoid all of this heartache and this kind of uncertainty. Well, I mean, that's an interesting one. There will be uncertainty because of the change, but you don't have to have members of staff feeling that degree of anxiety if you use emotional intelligence. I mean, I've worked with companies where some leaders have been very high on emotional intelligence, and they have watched the facial expressions and the body language of the people they're speaking to, whether it's in person or whether it's online, if it's on a Zoom call or whatever. And when they've registered what they think the mood of the room is, they have adjusted what they're saying, and then they watch how people are then responding, because they know that this leader has their back.
Absolutely spot on. That's something really need to take away from this particular session. So Sandra, I think we are coming to almost ending our conversation. It was very a flashy one with a lot of information. Where does one start to develop the skill of emotional intelligence? Where can one go to for support? What would be your suggestion?
So I think first of all, there are lots of community. I mean, whether your listeners are tuned into LinkedIn, there are lots of communities of emotional intelligence people who have an interest in it. But I think if they don't want to be part of a community yet, they want to do some stuff for themselves, the first thing I would invite them to do is to think about self-awareness. Really, just taking a couple of minutes a day, that's all it takes, is just to understand how they're feeling. Of course, they can follow me on LinkedIn. I'll include a list of some books in the show notes that they can go into just to get more of an understanding. But it's practicing that self-awareness in the first instance. Even if some of your listeners can maybe write a note in a journal, just a little book every day on how they're feeling. When you increase the level of understanding on how you show up, you'll be amazed at how conversations and relationships change very dramatically and very quickly.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So the last one I want to ask you, a small tip. I think you shared about journaling, about self-awareness, specifically for create that empathy mindset or compassionate mindset. What would be a good advice from your end?
There's a technique. There were a couple of techniques actually that I was taught when I was training to be a Goldman coach. And one of them is this: when you're feeling anxious or you're feeling concerned about something, if you ask yourself this question, you might find that you're in a different headspace. So if I said to you, you don't have to believe what you think, and really think about that statement. You do not have to believe what you think. That's one thing. The second thing is just like me. And this is a technique where you think of someone who perhaps you don't understand or is causing you stress or is annoying or whatever it might be that's less positive. And you think to yourself, they're a human just like me. They love emotional intelligence just like me. They have this interest just like me. And if you can do that just for maybe even a minute each day, you will find that that empathy will grow. The final thing I'd like to offer up is considering that you are connected. All of us are connected. This thing called emotional contagion means that your mood, your presence has a ripple effect every day. So if you take a moment to think about the impact that you're having and how you can have a positive impact on someone else, and that someone else will then have a positive impact on someone else, that will help you again to really look for opportunities to connect, make that emotional connection with others.
Okay, fantastic for those. Thank you very much for sharing that lovely 3 tips. I think our listeners will love it. So that's the time that we have for today. My key takeaway is as an organization leader, the way I treat my employees will treat my customers. So we should make sure that empathy and compassion as a leader, that's my key takeaway from this. I believe our listeners will have a fantastic, plenty of takeaway from Sandra Thompson. So that was Sandra Thompson, a founder of EI Evolution. So you can connect to Sandra via her social media platform. And please log on to www.eievolution.com to explore more of her work. And she does some fantastic. And I like her the video on LinkedIn. She shares how that role play happens on customer experience and empathy. Sandra, thank you for sharing that as well. And once again, I'm going to let you go. Thank you very much for your valuable time spending me in the cafe and sharing your insights and experience with our listeners. Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you. It's been an absolute delight.
Treat your employees with empathy and compassion, where they will treat your customers in the same way. Your customers' experience with your organization will bring them back, or else they will go towards your competitors. Yes, empathy and compassion will be the next magical potion for the growth of your business. I believe this conversation was very useful for your business. Special thanks to Sandra Thompson, founder of EI Evolution UK, for spending her valuable time in the cafe. Do stay tuned in for the next episode where I'll be taking up another interesting topic. EI Cafe with Azim, a 30 minutes of valuable learning. Keep listening, keep learning, and keep improving. tuning in to this episode of EI Cafe with Azim. We are sure to hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please do reach out to me. If you haven't done so already, make sure you are subscribed to the show, which is available in all major podcast platforms. You are notified when a new episode is posted. So rate it, review, and leave a comment and share with your friends. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you are leaving some great things that can help you in your life every day. Please do follow me on social media, Azim Sahil, and do write to me what topics and from whom do you want to hear it from. We will try to get them on board for you. Till I meet you another episode, checking out of the cafe. My name is Azim Sahil. Stay safe and God bless you.